And welcome back. We are now getting ready to start wrapping up our game, so it's a good time for us to revisit our game design document in order to make sure that we have everything that we kind of want to have within this game. So if we look at our core concept, we're answering a set of multiple questions and having a limited time to answer each question, which we are currently accomplishing with our game. If you look at our main feature, we have a mechanism to store and retrieve questions, buttons that allow the player to select an answer. We're adding a timer to add pressure. We have a scoring and the ability to restart the game, which is something that we actually haven't done here. Because right now, if you get to the last question, the game just kind of stops there. So let's just look at the other things that we have here. And of course, we have our screens. If we look at our additional features, we have a progress bar. That looks good. So this is, again, those additional features I talked about. This is something, if you didn't have in your game, that's okay because this is a recommended additional feature. We haven't done anything such as bonus points or look at other question types or any other kind of ideas. So these are things that, again, you could use to take that game to the next level besides what we currently have. But let's go ahead and address that one point that we still need to have here, which is the ability to restart the game. Now, before I go ahead and jump into building out that kind of final screen of when that game is completed, there's one thing that we need to address, which is the actual progress bar here. So if we look at our slider here, one thing you'll notice is it's currently interactable, which means if I run my game and then I click on this slider, I can actually end up inadvertently moving the slider around. So this is something that we want to fix, and it's actually relatively easy for us to be able to do. And so if I click here, you can see how it will jump through the questions. I can move that around. So again, we don't want that. So all we can do to fix it is just uncheck this interactable box, and that's going to resolve that issue for us. Now, to make my win screen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here to the game menu, and I'm going to make this so that way the question canvas here is actually, I don't want to look at this right now, so I'm actually going to hide that, and I'm going to turn back on my previs canvas just so I can see this. And what I want to do is actually go to the image here, and I want to change which image I'm currently using. So if you remember, we have a couple different images here that we can use, and what we want to do is have one is our play again screen. So I'm going to change it to that. So we'll go to my image, and I want to change that from the image that I was using previously. So I'll go ahead, open back up. Look here, we have mockup currently in here, so I'm just going to grab play again, replace mockup with that, and you can see we now have this previs that's going to show what our end screen is going to look like. So before I go ahead and show you how to do that, I want to challenge you, see if you can do this on your own. Go ahead and see if you can create another screen here, kind of like we have a canvas here for our question. See if you can create one that's going to control the win screen itself. And then, of course, have a text field right here that we can have to display the player score. And then also a button that we can have right here that's going to give them the option to play again. So go ahead and pause the video, see if you can do that on, and then we'll reconvene with that skill together. All right, so let's go ahead and create that win screen. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and I'm going to create a new UI element. I'm going to make a new canvas. Let's go ahead and call this our win canvas, or you can call it your play again canvas, whatever you want to feel is most appropriate. So I'm going to call this one my play again canvas. And once this canvas is created, then we can go ahead and create on here our next UI element, which is our Text Mesh Pro. And this is going to be our congratulations message here. So I'm just going to resize that, make that kind of approximately where I want it to be. Shore up these numbers just a little bit so it's a little bit nicer. There we go. And then I'll add in some quick dummy text right here just to kind of give a message for us to look at and kind of look at some text to size with. And then let's just go ahead and just resize the font. Let's do something like 65. So it gets nice and big there, or maybe even I'll do 72. That looks even nicer. And I want to make sure that that text is also probably going to be middle and centered, just so it's right here in the middle of my screen. And then we're going to go ahead and now create a button element. So I'm going to go down to UI, and let's go ahead and grab that button Text Mesh Pro. So let's go ahead and move this element here. I'm going to go ahead and resize it just a little bit. And let's go ahead and change the source image to one of our existing sprites. So for example, I could choose to make it the orange sprite here, though it's going to give us a nice good border here. And then I can kind of go ahead and resize this how I want. And I'm actually going to make it maybe a little bit bigger than my previs here, just so I can kind of see that. And that looks like it's coming along pretty nice here. And again, you can play around with that button to get the size that you want. But let's just go ahead and then also point out that we want to change a couple other things. So right now our transition is a color tint. We're going to actually make that to none. And we want to go ahead and look at the text of that button. And let's go ahead and change that to our play again text. And resize that as well. So I'm going to do 72 so it matches the other one. And I'm going to have centered and middled, so that looks good there. And also let's make sure our vertex color is set to all the way down to like a solid black, so it's nice and crisp here. There you go, that looks pretty good. And while we're here, let's go ahead and rename our text and button. So I'm just going to go ahead and right click and rename. And let's just call this our win text. And let's just call this our play again button. All right, our win screen is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and hide our previous canvas. And you can see this actually looks pretty sharp. So now what I'm going to do is just a little bit of quick cleanup here. I'm actually going to just collapse the play again canvas. I'm going to drag it so it's underneath the question canvas, not inside of it, but underneath it so it's on the same level here. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the previous canvas because I no longer need this element. All it's going to do is just take up space within the game. So I can just go ahead and delete that out of there. So now I only have to worry about these elements. Because again, I don't need the previs because all the elements that we were going to make using that as a reference are created. Now that everything's all set up here, we want to create a script that's going to allow us to do this play again functionality that we want. So I'm going to go to my scripts folder here, and let's go ahead and create a new C# script. And I'm going to call this one the win screen. And that's a good one, or we could call it the play screen, you know, whatever you want to call it. But I'm going to call it the win screen, even though I have this as the play again canvas. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this win screen element here, and I want to link it into this play again canvas. So I'm just drag it on so that way those link together. And so when I look at my play again canvas here, I'm going to add that win screen as a component. So now it's here, and we can open up the win screen script to begin editing this. Now we can go ahead and remove our update method because we're not going to necessarily need to call updates on this. Because remember, it's going to be a screen where we simply just have an option for us to click yes or no effectively. So the first thing we're going to do, since we're going to have to work with text here, is we need to make sure that we have in the using statement, we want to have the text mesh pro, so using TM Pro. So that makes sure that gets included. And then inside of here, let's go ahead and start getting ready to add a couple components in here. And so the very first thing we want to do is, of course, serialize a field here. And this is going to be a text mesh pro here. And let's just call this one the final score text. And since we're also going to be pulling in a score object here, much like how we did this previously with our quiz script here, we had, of course, create a score object called scores. I'm going to go ahead and create a score object here, and let's just go call this one the final score. And I'm calling that just so I'm not ever going to get that confused, because remember we have one called scores here, and since this is the final score of the game, it makes sense to call it that. Now what we want is that this final score to be initialized when this script is called. So let's set the final score equal to a find object of type score, and that will allow it to find this script here. So now let's create a method that's going to allow us to invoke that final score. So let's go ahead and create a public method. Make this void, and let's just call this one show final score. And what we want to do is here just go ahead and display out the text that's going to be rendered out to that screen. So to do that, let's use our final score text dot text, and we're going to set that equal to effectively the message that we want here in Unity. So I'm actually just going to copy this message here in Unity. And then I'm just going to go ahead and paste that message here just so I have something to work with. And I'm going to put quotations here to show that this is a string. And then let's just bring this in. And since I want this on a new line, I'm going to use the new line escape character in here. So this /n. And we want this to say you won with a score of something %. So I'm going to actually put a ending quotation here. Do plus delete out that part there, do another plus, and put quotations around this % here. And what I want to do is I have to fill in the value here. So remember, we have a final score, right, that we can use. And we can call, because it's part of the score class, we can call the calculate score. And let's just add a semicolon here so that way the compiler is nice and happy. So in Unity, let's go ahead and go back to our play again canvas. You can see now our final score text now has nothing in it. So we want to point that to this win text. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in as our object that we want to be updated. Now, even though we've created this final score text and we have the code created, there's actually something missing before we can go ahead and have our game cycle between these various screens and then have this functionality work so that way we can start the game over. So we're actually going to go ahead and look at that next. We have to use something known as a game manager that's going to allow us to go ahead and add that functionality into our game.